or a tree this way. Okay, it's important that we understand that as well. So he says, again, and they bring, verse 22, and they bring him unto the place called Golgotha, which is being interpreted the place of a skull. See, all of these little tidbits, these little details, they have meaning. When we understand who Yahushua HaMashiach is. Matter of fact, Brother Paul brought it out like this, that he is the head of the body. So naturally, they're going to execute him in a place that is called what? The place of a skull. Now there's something else I could share with you right now about that, but we're going to save that for another time. But here's another one. Put a pin in that. The fact that it was called the place of a skull where Yahushua will be executed. It has significance, it has meaning, and it ties into what Brother Paul said when he refers to him as being the head of the body. But we're going to stop there. Let's move on. Verse 23. And they gave him to drink wine mingled with myrrh, but he received it not. And when they had executed him or crucified him, they parted his garments, cast and lots upon them, what every man should take. And what it means when they crucified him, this is what it's talking about. When they nailed his hands to the stake, and they nailed his feet to the stake, right? Now just imagine the pressure of a nail going through your hands and it pulling down on your flesh. So you're having difficulty breathing, number one, but you're hanging down, and now this is pulling on your flesh. But sometimes the pain is going to get too unbearable. So now what you're going to do, you're going to push up with your feet to relieve some of the pressure on your hands being nailed. And now your feet is going to be taking the pressure. And now when that gets too painful, you're going to go back down and relieve some of the pressure off your feet again. And now it's back on your hand. And this was just a constant movement. And all the while that you're going through this, keep in mind, you're having problems breathing. Okay? Because just having your arms in the air like that makes it difficult. Keep these things in mind. Just painting a picture of everything that was happening to the sacrifice, our Passover lamb. All right? He says, verse 24 again, and when they had crucified him, they parted his garments, casting lots upon them, what every man should take. And it was the third hour. Now, it says, when you look at the third hour, now I'm going back. Hold up, you just read a passage that said it was 6 hours. That was in another place, okay? Now we're going to start counting the hours down. The third hour is approximately what we would call 9 a.m., okay? And it's talking about the third hour of the day. And it's talking about the third hour of the daylight portion, considering being from sunrise. So 3 hours after sunrise. So we're looking at sunrise as possibly being 6 a.m. And this is just approximation. I'm not saying this is an exact time, but I'm giving you an idea so that you can have something to relate to. Okay? So we're going to say approximately 9 a.m. Verse 25 again, and it was the third hour, again, 9 a.m., and they crucified him. So he was on that stake in the morning, right? And remember, at night, first thing he did, he had the Seder with the disciples. He went through everything that he needed to go through. After they were done that, they went out to the garden. He prayed. After the prayer, that's when they came to arrest him. And once they arrested him, that's when he started going to these different places. He went to Anan first. Then he went to Caiaphas, and then he went to Pilate, then he went to Herod, then he went back to Pilate, and then they started the persecutions. Okay? Now let's go to Matithia, chapter 27. Let's pick up in verse 45. It says, now from the 6th hour, now 3 hours after 9 a.m. is what? 12 p.m. So you're talking about afternoon time, right? Now from the 6th hour, there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. So from 12 to 3. And about the 9th hour, Yahushua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some of them stood there when they heard that, said, "This man calls for Eliah." Now this passage, when I think about it, this is problematic, but it makes the point though. Here's a question for us. When he said, "Eli, Eli," why did they think he was calling for Elijah or Eliah, right? Opposed to acknowledging the Psalms. Because David wrote that. When you look this passage up, you're going to reference on that this verse comes from one of the Psalms. But they didn't even recognize this was something that was being fulfilled right in their hearing. And I emphasize that to show how far removed they have been from Abba's word. Had they been in tune with what Abba's words say, they wouldn't have thought that he was calling on Elijah. They would have known, hey, he's saying the Psalms of David. But anyway, verse 48. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, "Let be, let us see whether Eliah will come to save him." Yahushua, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. In other words, he died. So now you're talking about the 9th hour. So approximately around that time, 3 p.m., he dies. Okay? Now keep in mind, all of this is happening during Passover. All right? Now we're going to go back to John chapter 19. We're going to pick up in verse 28. And it's going to mention some things again. All right? After this, Yahushua, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, "I thirst." Now there was a set vessel full of vinegar, and they filled the sponge with vinegar and put it upon hyssop and put it to his mouth. When Yahushua therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and gave it to go. So the same scenario. It didn't mention every detail that was mentioned in the previous excerpt, but it's still enough that you know it's the same exact time frame. Okay. Verse 31. It says, "The Yahudim therefore," and pay attention to this part, because we wanted to take this road to get to these different points so that you can see different things. Okay. "The Yahudim therefore, because it was the preparation," right? What do you mean preparation? Now, what we want to keep in mind, and I'm going to write a couple things up on the board for you all now. The preparation being the preparation for the following day, which is a high holy day. So you have, let's say, the 14th of Abib, then you have the 15th, then you're going to have the 16th, then you're going to have the 17th, okay? Okay. I want to make a point. All right. Now, let me read that again. John chapter 19, verse 31. "The Yahudim, therefore, because it was the preparation." Now again, the preparation that was occurring on the 14th of Abib here, right? It was taking place so that when the 15th comes in, the 15th of Abib is the high holy day. We're going to read a scripture about that in a minute. It says, "Because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the tree on the Sabbath day." Now see, this is where we have a discrepancy. Because what people think, most people, they think the day that was following the Passover was a weekly Sabbath, the 7th-day Sabbath. It was not. It was not a weekly Sabbath. It was listen what it says. "For that Sabbath day was an high day," meaning it was one of the annual high holy days. The first day of unleavened bread is a day such as that. So let's go to Leviticus chapter 23, verses 6 and 7 to verify that. Now we already know that Passover is on the 14th of Abib, right? Now it says in Leviticus 23, verse 6, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day, which is the 15th of Abib, in the first day you shall have an holy convocation, you shall do no servile work therein. When it says that you shall do no servile work, that made it a rest day. In other words, a Sabbath. Because that's what the word Shabbat means. It means to rest. It means to cease or desist from work. So the 15th of Abib was the high holy day. But listen to what happened though. Because people got things misconstrued because of a lack of understanding, they think that the Messiah was crucified on the Friday before the Sabbath day comes in. Now you have this whole teaching about Good Friday. That's a lie. It wasn't even on a Friday. There's so many things that man, because of a lack of understanding, with a little help from that old serpent, okay? But what mankind has done, he has confused, he has misinterpreted the word of the Most High, and he got people out here keeping Easter, which they now refuse to call it Easter. Now they want to call it Resurrection Sunday and all this type of foolishness, which we already talked about that. But matter of fact, we can maybe touch on it a little bit more. We introduced it, you know, the whole idea of the worship on the first day of the week by going through the 8 different places where it says the first of, okay? But now we're going to get into a little more detail even with that. But just so we get back to what we're learning here, John 19:31 again, the Yahudim therefore, because of the preparation, that the bodies should not remain upon the tree on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was an high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So now, just imagine everything that I just explained in regard to the process of how they executed them. So, if your arms are here, and they're nailed or tied, however they did it, and you're pushing up and you're going down, pushing up and going down. See, it's like it's giving you a little ease, a little relaxation. But now, since it's taking too long for y'all to die, we're going to break y'all legs. So once the legs are broken, it's no more pushing up. Now you're just going to hang. Now you're just going to suffocate. Because you can't push up anymore. You're not going to be able to relieve yourself anymore. Okay? That's why they would break their legs. So he says, let's go to Devarim, which is Deuteronomy. It's another, interesting. The way Abba set things up, it's all in this word. Listen to what he says here. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and 23. Pay attention. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but you shall in any wise bury him that day. Excuse me. For he that is hanged is cursed of Elohim. Remember when the scripture says that the Messiah became a curse for us? Well, it's because of the manner in which he was killed. He was hanged on a tree. Again, for he that is hanged is cursed of Elohim. That your land be not defiled, which Yahweh your mighty one give you for an inheritance. So they wanted to make sure that these men, they died in a timely fashion so they can have them buried, so that because the next day that was coming was a high holy day, a high Sabbath day, they did not want the land to be defiled by dead bodies. Okay? All of this Abba has orchestrated in his word. It's in there. So let's go back to John chapter 19. Let's pick up in verse 32. It says, therefore the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who was crucified with him. But when they came to Yahushua and saw that he was already dead, they didn't break his legs. However, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. Think about that. Now, take your mind back. Okay? Take your mind back. He was beaten. The crown of thorns was placed on his head. When the scriptures say he was scourged, we didn't get into the details of it, but he was whipped. All of these different things that were being done to him caused bruises and caused him to bleed. So he's bleeding. They put the crown of thorns on his head. He's bleeding this whole time. In other words, he is shedding his blood the whole time. He's shedding his blood. And when they come and they stab him that last time, the last little bit of blood that he got in him, guess what? Now it's being shed. Verse 35. He who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, that you may believe. For these things happen that the scripture might be fulfilled. A bone of him will not be broken. Again, another scripture says, they will look on him whom they pierced. Now, remember, a day is reckoned at sunset, meaning that when the sun sets, the old day ends, a new day begins. Keep that in mind. Verse 38. After these things, Yusuf of Ramatayim, or Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Yahushua, but secretly for fear of the Yahudim, not going to labor this point, but just think, you had people who believed in Yahushua, but they believed in him secretly. Not only him, Nicodemus. Okay? Matter of fact, it mentions that. He says again, after these things, Yusuf of Ramatayim, being a disciple of Yahushua, but secretly for fear of the Yahudim, asked of Pilate that he may take away Yahushua's body. Pilate gave him permission. He came therefore and took away his body. Nicodemus, who at first came to Yahushua by night, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 Roman pounds. So they took Yahushua's body and bound it in linen cloth with the spices, as the custom of the Yahudim is to bury. Now in the place where he was executed, there was a garden. In the garden was a new tomb in which no man had ever yet been laid. Then, because of the Yahudim preparation day, for the tomb was near at hand, they laid Yahushua there. Keeping in mind, they wanted to make sure he was buried before the next day come in. So that means he was buried during the daylight portion still of Passover, before the sun set and the 15th of Abib come in. We have to keep that in mind. So we just going to do an approximation here, right? So let's just say, after 3 o'clock, he died at 3 o'clock. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that this happened at the exact time. I just want to give y'all a point of reference. That's all I'm doing right now. Okay, so let's say it was the 14th of Abib. Let's say it was 5:30 p.m., right? So that means from 5:30 p.m. on the 14th to 5:30 p.m. on the 15th, that's one day. And then from 5:30 p.m. on the 15th to 5:30 p.m. on the 16th, that's 2 days, right? And then you got 5:30 p.m. on the 16th to 5:30 p.m. on the 17th. That's your 3 days. So that means that about 5:30 p.m. on the 17th of Abib, Yahushua would have resurrected. That's the 3 days and 3 nights. A 24-hour, 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night, give or take. Now remember, this is during a time when the days are now starting to get a little longer. So it wasn't exactly 12 hours a day. It was 12 hours plus, give or take. And the night would still be maybe 11 hours plus, because the days are getting longer and the nights are getting shorter. But overall, you're still looking at a 24-hour period. So you had one 24-hour period, two 24-hour periods, three 24-hour periods, marking a 72-hour period, right? It's 72 hours. Now, some people, they want to downplay that, but that's significant and it's very important. Okay? Now, I'm going to make another comparison with everything that we're talking about, right? In John chapter 12, verses 23 and 24, listen to what Yahushua says. All right? Just pay attention. Yahushua answered them, "The time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Most certainly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Why is he telling them this? And then he's connecting it to the Son of Man being glorified. Once again, why is he doing that? Why? Let's make another comparison. In John chapter 15 and verse 4, listen to what he said. He said, "I am the real vine, and my Father is the husbandman." I'm the true vine. My Father, he's the gardener. See? Matter of fact, in one of the other parables, you know what he says? What he says is a grain can also be compared to what? A seed. And you know, he gave several parables about the seed. But in one of those parables, when he defined what the seed is, you know what he said? What? Excuse me. He said that the seed was the word of Elohim. Food for thought. Shema Israel. He that has an ear, let him hear. So he's letting people know. He's letting those who are with him know that when he dies, he is going to bring life. He's going to bring fruit, Scripture says, right? Now, let's call back to mind what's going on here, based off of what this diagram is here. Now, Yahweh had prepared a great fish to swallow up Yunah, and Yunah was in the belly of the fish 3 days, 3 nights. This is the way it's supposed to happen, right? Now, this is where we want to start getting some more fine details about the resurrection. So we already see it had to have been on the 17th of Abib, before the sunset, because he was buried just before sunset, so his resurrection would have been just before sunset. Okay? Let's go to Matthew chapter 28 and let's go to verse 1. It says, listen to what it says. After the Sabbath. Now, in this part right here, and see, now, this is where the confusion comes in. When we read in John chapter 19, and it said that the Sabbath was coming in, right? They automatically assume, because of a lack of understanding, that it's going to be the weekly Sabbath. So then when we get to this part, and it said that after the Sabbath, they automatically assume it's still the weekly Sabbath. Now what's interesting about it, in John chapter 19, that's not the weekly Sabbath, that's the Sabbath of the first day of unleavened bread, the 15th of Abib. Okay? That's what that was. This is the holy day there. Okay? But when it mentions in Matthew chapter 28, after the Sabbath, this is the weekly Sabbath. So this is taking place 1, 2, 3 days after the Messiah has been buried, and by 5:30 p.m. approximately, give or take, he resurrects. This says, after the Sabbath, late in the day, as it began to grow light toward the first day of the week. So, because a day begins at sunset, what we come to realize is this. This is actually a Wednesday. This was a Thursday. This was the Friday. And this one right here, I was going to say Saturday, but no. I'm going to say Sabbath. Seventh day. This was the seventh day, Sabbath. Now that in and of itself is significant. The fact that he would have resurrected on the seventh day of the week, which is the weekly Sabbath, it ties into why the Sabbath is part of this layout. This is where we're moving toward. And we're going to get into this a little later on as we go through some other things, but put a pin in it. The time that the Messiah resurrected was actually on the seventh day Sabbath. That's when he resurrected. So by this time, he had already resurrected. But listen to what it says here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to incorporate what it says in Luke and John and in Mark. Okay, so I'm going to start all over. Matthew chapter 28 verse 1. It says, after the Sabbath, late in the day, as it began to grow light toward the first day of the week. Now when it said the first day of the week, it's talking about the daylight portion of the day. Okay? As it began to dawn toward the daylight portion of the day. That's what it means. Now how do we know that? Because in Luke 24:1, when they got there, it said it was very early in the morning. And in John chapter 20 and verse 1, it says when it was yet dark. And in Mark chapter 16 and verse 2, it said they came into the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. So you got the time frame that they arrived at the tomb that Sunday morning, as people like to say. It was at the time when it was still dark, the sun was rising and it was about to become light. That's about the time. So the dawning, okay? The dawn, all right? The evening had passed. The beginning of the day had already passed. So by the time they got there, it was about to go to the night, not the nighttime, to the daylight portion. Now keep in mind, it's not like we have today. You're not going to be out there working and doing things at night because it's dark out there. If you ever been on vacation somewhere, or maybe you live in a place where you don't have a lot of light pollution, if you live in the inner city, you wouldn't understand it. But when you go out to the country or the rural areas that don't have a bunch of street lights and a lot of big city buildings and things like that, you're not going to understand this. But if you've been out in the country area that you don't have a whole lot of artificial lighting from the lamp posts or from the buildings and things like that, you see how dark it actually gets at night. Matter of fact, when you look up in a clear sky on a night like a clear sky or on a night when it's dark, the amount of stars that you see up there is ridiculous. It's a whole bunch more stars than you see when you're in the inner city and you got all this light pollution impacting what you can actually see. And that has some meaning as well. So they weren't going to do anything during the nighttime portion of a day because that's typically when we sleep. So they got up early in the morning, they went to the tomb, because what they're going to do, they're going to take care of what they weren't able to take care of just before he died, or was buried, excuse me. Because they had to get the body in the tomb and everything fast so that they can get back and get ready for the high holy day that was coming in. Okay? Now, all that being said, okay, he says, came Miriam of Magdala and the other Miriam to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of Adonai descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him the keepers did shake, and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said to the women, fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Yahushua, which was executed or crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where